My goal. Did he
Which one?
say like he guy that one? Not my. Actually, I may have to pay a trip to Lincoln depending on if a guy actually like he mentioned Lincoln, yeah, but did he mention his estate or no?
He did not mention many specifics. From what you could tell, it sounds like they'd probably be aware that you might live somewhere in Lincoln, but might be hard to figure out where.
Oh, okay.
You can't rule it out exactly, but from what he told you, they were more interested in what was happening here, or rather in Canterbury.
You got that bit. I just want to know how paranoid I should be.
Well, that's entirely up to you.
Yes.
I mean, they're inquisitors.
I don't have much influence. Not yet.
I mean, they never really have a lot of influence, but that doesn't mean they're not dangerous.
Exactly.
Also true.
So what's altering your emotion, Creepy? I'm angry. Sarah's on drug, painkillers, and Shadow's on sake.
You're angry?
Yeah, I'm angry. Because my music.
Yep, the GM is angry. We know what's going to happen now.
I have wine. Okay.
I am here, hopefully.
Anybody hear that?
I heard
Can you
Okay,
hear me?
so what's altering you? We've already got the rest of us handled.
Nothing.
Computer freezing. Annoyed.
There you go.
He's annoyed.
You can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I was able to upload a few songs, but not all the ones I wanted.
They better be good, or else.
Don't get me started. Okay. Any more questions before we get started?
Yeah, nah.
Good. Robert and Elined. The two of you are departing from London in mid to late March of 1455, intent on traveling north towards York. After having had a divisive meeting with Thomas and Cormac, whom in so many words have implied perhaps not only sympathy but possibly even support of this anarch revolt, they seem to be leaving for Edinburgh. From London to York, traveling by carriage, it will take you about 3 weeks of travel. Unless someone corrects me, I assume that travel is done with carriage and retainers by day, camping at night. During your travel, Guy DeFree does tell you one other thing, Robert, which he remembers from his time in the dungeon. He remembers a name. He thinks in reference to perhaps someone in charge, by the name of Poitiers.
How do you spell that?
We'll put it in Discord.
Aha.
He's not exactly sure who it is. It was only mentioned once. But you can both make a roll for perception, empathy, standard difficulty as you make your travel north. That includes you, Elined. Successes from Robert.
It would probably help if I actually clicked in the box while I was typing.
There it is, 3. So you both get a good impression of Guy during this time. He seems shaken. You both at times catch him in a state of stillness, staring wide-eyed into nothing, looking nowhere, frozen. He also startles more easily now. And during this time, he physically improves quite quickly from the vitae you've provided him. You think his soul or his mind remains damaged somehow.
So noted.
Alright. After about 3 weeks, which puts you around the middle of April, you reach York, and you see a new sight, which is at first alarming. There are many tents and camps outside of York. Elined, your first thought is that the city is besieged, but upon closer inspection, there are none of the telltale signs that a siege is going on, and it looks like travel is free between the city and the camps. You imagine this must be an army gathering under the command of someone already in the city. There are many tents here. It looks like it's walled off with basic wooden palisades. Obviously, with this much proximity to the city, they would likely have enough time to get inside the city walls. There is not much need for heavy barricading here. Fortunately, with your group the small size it is, it does not draw much attention from the camps as you pass through the gates. And you see banners as you get closer. The banners, you assume, that must represent the leaders of this army, the commanders. I'll have you make, both of you, intelligence politics roll to recognize who is here based on these banners. Standard difficulty. Okay. 3 from Robert, 4 from Elined. So you both recognize all of the main banners, at least of the most important nobility. You see the Duke of York is here. You also recognize the banners of House Neville, specifically the Earl of Warwick and his father, the Earl of Salisbury, both of whom are named Richard Neville. So I will refer to them as Warwick and Salisbury, respectively. And given that you both did pretty well on that roll, you both also recognize that it's not surprising to see these banners together. House Neville has been supportive of the Plantagenet, and Duke of York specifically. So the group of you pass into the gates of York, into the city. Most of the men, looks like, are staying outside, although you can tell even as you pass in, there are more people in York than you're used to seeing. Perhaps some of these men are on leave briefly, or enjoying the inns and brothels, the taverns while they're here. So the screen pans to the two of you as you enter by carriage, and you're seeing all of this. What do we see when we turn to Robert?
He's taking in the sights, the numbers. But he mainly intends on entering the court of Ragna quickly.
As does she.
So you both watch in silence as the carriage moves on. And eventually the gatehouse closes. Your carriage is stabled, your belongings set up. By this point, Guy is in good enough health to move independently, and he does most of the work in unloading your goods. And Gertrude sets about preparing lodgings for at least the two of them. This frees you up to return to the court of the Yorkist Prince. So you return to York Castle, where you've been received in the past. Although you don't get quite the same welcome that you've gotten in the past. You're stopped several times by guards. You have to explain that your purpose is here. Fortunately, you're recognized by Mr. Sharp, the attendant to Ragna, who helps facilitate your entry into the castle. You can tell there's a tension here that there was not present before. The three of you are walking up the steps to the Great Hall as Mr. Sharp speaks sidelong to you. Apologies for the brisk welcome. It is quite tense about here. I'm afraid Master Jasper and Lady Ragnar are quite busy.
Of course, and I certainly expected as much.
For the foreseeable future, or... I'll let the question hang.
The two of you are just entering the Great Hall as you ask that, and he kind of turns to you looking a bit nervous. Well, hard to say. And he offers a brief, forced smile. Why don't we carry this on further in the salon?
My apologies, but may we speak to you in private, so we may tell you our, well, at least my intentions here, so you may pass the message along. I am aware they are rather.
The group of you are leaving the Great Hall off to the right towards one of these side rooms, and you actually have to make way, and Mr. Sharp actually stops you and kind of holds a hand out to guide you to the side to make way as a procession of guards and attendants follows a well-dressed man. You can tell he's noble just by the appearance and the retinue around him. And it seems that Mr. Sharp kind of bows his head in deference.
Elined will follow the lead and curtsy at said.
Robert will follow as well, practicing proper social cues.
Neither of you recognize the face of the man who passes by, this noble, and he seems not to give any attention to any of you, barely looking you over as he passes and saying something to one of his attendants sidelong in a hushed whisper. And after this procession passes, Mr. Sharp continues to lead you on, and you do end up in what looks like one of the private salons you've been in the past. Finally, he stops and seems to ease up a bit in his tension, just ever so slightly. I think we can speak a bit more plainly now.
Of course. Well, to put it quite bluntly, we, in our mission that Lady Ragna is well aware of, I have come to the conclusion, and my conclusion is that, well, we seem to have a common weak link. In short, I am giving her my support.
He looks very serious as he hears that and nods once. I imagine she'll be quite pleased and perhaps relieved to hear that. Although I must inform you, my lady, it could be some nights before she is able to speak with you.
Of course. This is not my first time in such tense situations. I am well aware of how things.
He bows his head. Shall I prepare room for you? He looks between the two of you.
That would be wonderful.
Yes, indeed it would.
He nods again, and a look of anxiety kind of passes over him again. Please, make yourselves comfortable here. I'll have an attendant be by to bring you to your chambers.
Very good, then.
He bows again and departs, going off down a hallway and then ascending some stairs, leaving the two of you a moment to convene.
So, What do you suppose we do about our compatriots?
Part of me hopes they would see the errors of their ways, but that may be a little bit too hopeful.
Cormac might be persuaded. He is a more logical sort. I am uncertain about Thomas.
What you say is true enough. But they seem quite convinced that the current system leads to
Do remember
suffering.
the one speaking throughout the majority of that altercation between the four of us was Thomas. Cormac and I, for the most part, were silent on the sideline.
Cormac voiced his support in the areas of importance to him, but yes, certainly most of the talking was Thomas. What conclusion are you drawing from this?
Conclusion? No, I do not have one. I was merely wishing to hear your thoughts on the matter.
I would love to know what got them thinking of overthrowing social order in the first place.
Indeed so.
But to remedy the situation, it does not help that we are separated at this moment. The deeper they get into their plot, no doubt.
But if we went with them, there could have easily been another retinue of people of similar minds that would have very well often.
Quite correct. This is a safe choice. Perhaps a correct one.
Hence why my thought is along the lines of getting this little squabble over and done with sooner rather than later, so we can focus on the more dangerous threat.
Yes. I would love to see this issue quelled quickly. But I do wonder if they are quite evenly matched. What would be the tipping scale?
The tipping scale is I am in control of the Covenant's army. Or will be when the time for blows comes.
And you are certain that Barbaros is unfit to rule?
I have seen as much from our interactions with him, and I have heard as much from his brother.
His brother, you say?
Aye, that is what I said.
What insight has he provided you?
He believes that the Magister, the Tremere, has some sort of sway over him. And that, well, if the Magister was removed, it could alleviate things, though I believe we are far past the point of that being a viable.
Perhaps. Certainly doesn't help that we are quite a distance away, and had not made that our goal sooner. The Magisters, do you hold a grudge against them? The Magister.
I have seen how Barbaros interacts, and he never seems to interact without addressing his Magister first, or waiting for some sort of cue. Not having the Magister leave the room when more secretive matters are brought up. Those types of things.
Out of character, going back to the conversation Robert had with Barbaros, can you reflect on that and get a feel if Magister was indeed in control?
Sure. Give me an intelligence empathy. As you reflect on the dynamic from your perspective.
Standard?
Yes. Wow. 5 success. When you think back on it, Elined's words do seem to resemble what you recall as well. Barbaros is always attended by this advisor, Magister Tradian, and you don't recall ever hearing any disagreement between the two of them. If anything, it seemed as his words carried as much or more weight than the gauntlets. The more you think about it, the more you do see a subtle but certainly present level of significant influence that this Magister seemed to have, and he seemed to wield it quite discreetly.
Yes, when I think about the words you say, I can see how you've reached that conclusion, certainly.
I'm aware you have your own alliances, and I will not ask upon them. But I feel that having a puppet prince within the Covenant is more of a hindrance than anything else. We know not this Magister's true goals. Nor is this Magister bound to the same loyalties as the prince.
Quite. And this is why, even despite Ragna's obvious thirst for power, you believe that she is more stable than a controlled Barbaros.
Significantly more stable. I will not have the very society we are part of be felled because someone in their leadership position is being puppeted by someone else.
Fair enough. My only lament is perhaps not more knowledge on what the Magister wants, what he seeks.
I unfortunately know of no Tremere in the area to ask about that.
Assuming the clan is very tight-knit, which would make sense, seeing their status as being quite the pariah of this day. Perhaps I could find a Tremere somewhere and inquire further.
You can certainly try. I am uncertain if there are any here or any city nearby that has them. They are very few and far between, at least from my perspective.
Oh yes, they stay quite hidden, but I have a feeling I can find one here. I have spent some time in the court of York.
Then you would be better than I to find one.
Do you intend on remaining until opportunity for assisting Ragna?
I intend to discuss with her the matters, and after doing so, it will be seen if remaining is beneficial or not. It might be more beneficial to return to what forces the Covenant has and make sure they are ready for battle when the time comes.
Very good. Well then, after we get settled in our rooms, I shall start my search. I will let you know if I find anything.
Alright, and I thank you. I will go find Gertrude and inform her as to the change of our location.
Do you think it would be beneficial for Guy to assist Gertrude? Does seem quite off.
I believe Guy needs someone near him to help him right now, because he is clearly not mentally there after the events he has been through.
Yes. You don't have any complaints if this arrangement is made?
So long as his instability does not harm her.
I would be very surprised if it did. And hoping that never comes to pass. If it does, then I leave whatever fate in your hands.
Oh, I will be quite plain. If it ever does, I will cut him down where he stands.
As I suspect.
And it's around that time that an attendant comes down inquiring about the need for a room, and the two of you are invited upstairs to some of the guest chambers, not far from the ones you held previously, in fact. And after that, Elined, you depart back into the city to find Gertrude and bring them back to the castle.
Yes, to inform them of the change in our location.
Okay. That's easily enough done. So Gertrude and Guy begin packing up the belongings, and they seem like they're about the task of moving back to the castle. Meanwhile, Robert, you are departing your chambers, and as you're passing back through the halls of the castle, from the side you feel two small hands clasp around yours and start guiding you away, and you realize quickly that it is Dorothy, dressed in an emerald green cloak.
Robert's not going to protest this. He'll follow along.
She's very quiet. She looks back to you quickly so that you can see it's her face, and seems to say nothing else or give no explanation other than that as she steals you away. You end up taking a somewhat protracted exit through the castle and into the streets. Finally, at length, she does speak up. Robert, I am so glad you came. It has been quite, well, tense, as you might imagine. All these soldiers here. She smiles, but you can see concern in her eyes.
Yes, Covenant business kept me away far too long. How have things progressed?
Well, that's precisely what I wish to speak with you about. And she kind of looks about herself conspiratorially. You've stopped somewhere down the street, a ways from the castle, and there are not many people out and about on this street that you've stopped at. But she takes your arm again and continues on, at a less hurried pace, but certainly purposeful. I've been speaking with, well, our mutual friends. Some developments have been made, but we should speak when we have more privacy than the streets provide.
Of course. Lead the way to a spot you know is quiet.
She leads you a short distance through the streets, and you end up in a similar back alley room as you were once led to. It's somewhat obscure behind some of the larger tenement buildings and homes. It's something of a small wooden shack. And once inside, she closes the door. There's a small candle on the table. You think perhaps it's maybe the exact same room and building that you were brought to before, that you don't exactly recall a similar way to get there. All the same, you are not greeted by Anselmus or Randall Penborough. And she takes a few steps in before turning back to you. What news has there been from the Gauntlet and abroad?
The Gauntlet has decided to interact more in this feud. Peace would have been the preferred option, but peace has broken down. Therefore, we choose who comes out on top.
Her hands kind of steeple together a bit nervously. And the Gauntlet as a whole is backing...
The Gauntlet is not of a unified mind in this case, which is the issue. Indeed, some see Ragna as being the safe choice.
And whom would that be?
Well, what do you have in mind for them? Because I am certain I can convince with at least a good reason why Ragna should not be backed.
You should know that Lord Anselmus has departed up north. He has gone seeking the aid of the Scots.
Then I suppose the search for the mark is of no longer any consequence.
Oh, it's of all the consequence, my dear. If you find and are able to prove that she has this mark which Anselmus claims exists, that could be quite damning. From what he says, these Northmen might be powerful allies. But no, he means to speak with the Prince of Edinburgh, Malcolm MacDougall. He left weeks ago.
I see. Anything else?
The Coven seems quite intent on strengthening Barbros' position. She seems to be kind of idly playing at her hair a bit nervously. Mr. Penborough has been in contact with the Chester Prince through proxies, mind you.
Aha. And that is what he has learned.
I think perhaps the time of action may be drawing near for our coven here.
I won't disagree with that. By chance, is Pinborough still in the area?
I'm expecting to hear from him in a few nights from now. Here. And she gestures out to the room. You should come and hear what he has to say.
Yes, I shall.
She forces a quick smile again. I'm so relieved you've come back. I began to worry.
Only the eternal death could keep me from the promise we've made.
She smiles more genuinely there. Well, I shan't keep you any longer. I think it best that you be seen in public again.
Quite. And tell me, has Ragna been cloistered away during the planning of this upcoming battle?
My sire distances herself more and more from me these nights. Sometimes even forcibly. She knows
In
not to
what way?
trust me. And she looks down at the ground dejected. There are parts of the castle I'm no longer privy to.
You are banned from them.
Some halls, yes. I wonder some nights if I may wake up to the sun. If perhaps she knows more than I think.
She has informants.
She looks to you wide-eyed.
Do you know of them?
I know she has many resources which I am not aware of. Do you know more?
Out of character, I'm trying to recall the name. Is it Sienna?
Yes, Sienna. Is
Okay.
the name you heard.
I do have a name. Sienna. I've not heard of them my time here, but perhaps you have.
I have heard that name once or twice. I knew not in reference to whom. She is seldom spoken of.
She is quite the resource for Ragna. Do you have any links I can draw upon to somehow match a face with this name?
I'm sorry, my love. This Sienna must be quite the recluse, or very skilled at what she does. I have nothing on this one. Perhaps Mr. Penborough will.
Perhaps. Do you at least know the context of the mentioning of her name?
She looks down in thought for a moment before looking back to you. Jesper. It was Jesper who slipped her name in front of Ragnar and myself. He said something to the effect of, "The Virgin will take care of it." I'd heard that name before, Santa the Virgin. My sire gave him a look, and he was cowed by it. I knew then it was not a name I was to hear.
That is at least something to go by. Very good. We have much work to accomplish in these upcoming nights.
She nods again, kind of twisting at the end of her hair.
I would love to spend more time with you, but as you say, I must get back into public.
Of
And
course,
stay
my
safe.
dear. Time enough for that later.
Quite.
And she smiles as you depart. She seems to linger behind. And you make your way back into the streets. Where will Robert go next?
I'll head back towards his chambers. He'll think, well, for now, he'll head back. He has to wait for other people to arrive, perhaps. He's not keen on waiting the whole night, though, but throwing her name around would not be helpful. So, entitled The Virgin. How many monasteries were in York, if any?
There are many chapels and churches in York, as there are in every English city. I'll say maybe a dozen or so.
Yeah, not going to have much hope there, then. Where was Elysium held again?
Give me one moment. So I was trying to get a count on those churches, but I'll have to look for it later. Elysium in York. Okay, here we go. It is at the York Minster Cathedral. There is a descending staircase which leads into the crypt, which is a kind of Elysium. At least it's been declared Elysium, although you're not sure how popular it is for those simply lounging, compared to maybe the Elysium of London, where it's very common for many Canaanites to linger and loiter.
Fair enough. How many chambers, well, how much of the layout of Ragna's castle is known to Robert? Like, he's obviously well acquainted to where her chambers are. But perhaps he'll spend time getting to know as much as he can of the place.
Of the castle?
Yes.
All right. Are you trying to skulk about and get into places that are obviously guarded off, or only the places that are obviously accessible to you?
We'll start by making note of which places are guarded off. And that would be a fine start.
Okay. I won't have you roll for this first part. Most of the places that you get to are places you've already been. The Great Hall for receiving, many of the guest rooms and the hallways that lead to these areas, the larder and the stock houses for supplies, the kitchen, some of the salons, you find that some of the upper levels are much more guarded. You think there's an entire story or level near the top of this castle which you are not allowed in at all, and may potentially be a residence for the Duke himself, which would make sense. And so it looks like no one's being allowed up there unless you have a very good reason to go up. So you'll see an attendant bringing food up who's looked over but is passed, but no one else is even trying.
Are the same attendants used or different ones?
How long are you watching this hallway?
Well, he has at least 2 nights, or at least one. So he'll watch this night and a good portion of the next nights, just to learn the movements of the servants of the castle.
Okay. Give me a quick appearance etiquette roll, difficulty 8, to stay in this castle and just watch the hallway leading up to private residence.
Difficulty 8, huh?
It does look suspicious to have someone just watching for hours on end.
Fair enough. I'll throw a willpower into this.
Okay. Four successes with the willpower. Fortunately, you don't look like the common beggar or even a lowly serf. You look like a noble. You look like you belong there. Perhaps a brother or a cousin or a friend of one of the other nobles who have already been here. And so you're able to blend in fairly easily while still keeping an eye on this long hallway and the staircase leading up to the higher levels. And so you spend basically the rest of the night watching this. And in the darkest hours of the night, there isn't very much movement, but you see that it's really just one person going up and down that seems to have been entrusted. You think he must be some kind of important butler or servant. He comes up and down a few times, but not many, and less as the night waxes. So that's what you'll be doing for the rest of the night, is casing this upper level to the York Castle. Elined, how are you spending the rest of your evening?
After she brings the ghouls back, she doesn't know where court is here, so she can't attend that. As such, she would likely just be waiting, just in case someone is sent.
Have you not been to York before?
She's been to York, but very, very briefly. She did not go to court.
All the same, you're an Ancilla, and your sire would have taught you at the basics of the important Covenant capital cities, most likely. So I'll let you have a chance at knowing at least where Elysium is, if you succeed on intelligence politics. Standard difficulty. See if you can remember based on what you were told.
Nope.
No, unfortunately, with your lack of experience and just the one time you think your sire might have gone over where the Elysia of the important cities were, you just don't remember exactly where. But you do think it's safe enough to wait a night or two before you're brought to the attention of the prince, or at least her child. So So you will be otherwise waiting in the salon, you said?
She will be waiting where she can be found. Well, where she can be easily found, yeah.
Okay. Once in a while, you'll see attendants pass here and there. As the night goes on, it's fewer and fewer people. But Mr. Sharp does check in on you a couple of times and seems to take note. And that is how you spend your first night in York. We will transition to a different part of the British Isles. Okay. Meanwhile, catching up with Thomas and Cormac. The two of you meant to depart London, but I believe Thomas may have had some plans before leaving for Scotland.
Indeed. We need to start by getting Cormac a new suit of clothes, and I thought we might use that as an opportunity to bait out whoever it is that was stalking Elined and Robert.
Okay. So you go down to Seville Row, famed for its artisan tailors. Ironically, the front for Elysium is one of the best of these tailors. And given that you are a very dignified and known customer and participant of the organization and establishment below it, you arrange to have a nice amount reduced on purchases and tailoring done at this establishment in particular. So Cormac, you get your measurements taken for new garments, which will be ready for you probably at the end of the week.
While they're strolling around, Tom is going to keep an eye out for possible tails. Anyone who might be tagging along that shouldn't be for longer than they ought.
Sure. Give me a perception, alertness, standard difficulty. Four successes. You feel confident that no one is really tracking you. Once in a while you see someone who you think is following a bit too close, but then you don't really see them again. If you are being stalked, it's someone of supernatural ability who is far beyond your means of detecting, or there's really just no one following you right now.
Both of which are acceptable answers. Better than being stalked by a hunter.
What is Cormac doing during this time? You know you have maybe a week to wait on these custom fit tailored garments.
He's going to maintain a low profile. Not knowing whether they can truly trust Robert and Elined with the information they've given them. And who they could have told.
Alright. So you keep a low profile going into the beginning of April.
And I figure while we're getting Cormac fitted, probably pop down into Elysium to see if Cash is.
Right. He's not always there, but you check a couple times during the week, and eventually you do find Cash Solus visiting Elysium, speaking with some of the neonates there. So you do come upon him one of these nights. He seems to bow his head to you as he recognizes you when you enter Elysium.
Good to see you in good spirits.
He finishes up his discussion with the neonates and takes a few steps forward. Cannot say that they're very good spirits. What? Alive, at least.
I was about to suggest better than they might have been.
I've not forgotten what you did for me.
I didn't think you had. And given that you were aware of the state of things, it may come a time I need you to return the favor.
I wondered when you'd come calling for that.
Truth be told, I'm loath to even suggest such a thing. You're a good man, Cash. And it's not a system I like.
Aye. And yet you do use it?
This will be the second time in over a century. The last time I was on the unfortunate end.
Well, good for you. You got your boon from the sheriff.
I hope never to call it in.
For my sake, I hope we're both right about that.
It's obvious on his face that Tom is very conflicted about the entire affair. So even if he is proceeding with using the Elder's game, he's not happy with himself over it. And hopefully that in and of itself is enough solace for Cash Solus.
He nods to you, and then seems to turn, sensing that there's nothing else to speak of. Does Cormac accompany Thomas on that? Was he invited?
Tom would have at least let him know what he was doing.
Yeah, Cormac is not going to Elysium.
Understood. No Cormac. Tom, you otherwise see that your presence in Elysium has definitely gone noticed. Bella Matea is not present, but many of the neonates have certainly noticed you. Some seem to look in reverence, but more look in concern or uncertainty.
They might have a different reaction when Judith shows up, but at some point Tom would trim back the staff at the manor just in case it's marked, minimize potential casualties in case hunters come knocking, make arrangements for Kasim to remove household goods and whatnot to a warehouse while the castle is finished.
Alright. Kazim sets about just that task. Your staff are slowly diminished in number, and your goods are brought to one of the London warehouses, at least the most expensive of them, where Kazim deems them to be secure. And fortunately, with your trading here, you have some knowledge as well of the more secure areas and warehouses to use in London, and that does go towards increasing the security that you are able to find. Of course, this all is going to take time, but the process has begun.
And Tom doesn't necessarily have to be there for it to happen.
No.
I do want to also see about redoubling construction personnel at the castle. See if we can't get more bodies out there to help with renovation.
You look over your ledgers of accounts, the coin you have coming in from your ongoing enterprises and going out towards the labor, and it doesn't seem that cutting back on this manor is going to noticeably increase the rate that the castle is built. So you're still looking at probably about 2 years in total.
So no spare coin to send hired hands, huh?
There is spare coin, but not enough to make a very large difference.
It's worth a shot. Meanwhile, as Judith,
what does Judith intend to do with her time in London?
one of those nights when Cash isn't present, Judith would be. She would, I hesitate to use the phrase hold court, but she'd definitely mingle with those neonates that she has in the past heard complain about the status quo.
Fortunately, Judith has had a lot more success than Thomas in building rapport, both independently and through her time at Bella Matea's soiree. Judith is a much more palatable personality to draw neonates to. and they're all too ready to lament their fears of the looming war and their concern about what's going to happen next. Some of them seem excited about the opportunity, but most of them seem alarmed.
Those that seem most sincere, as far as the most downtrodden and those with the least to lose at this point, because it's been taken by the elders and whatnot, she would suggest they speak with Tom Lefroy about such things.
Make a wits empathy roll, difficulty 6. We'll say difficulty 5, actually. You've done a pretty good job at building rapport as Judith. Alright, 2 successes. So amidst those that you speak to over these nights, there are a couple whom you recognize as fitting the bill for the kind of neonate you're looking for. Those who are disgruntled and even disillusioned with the state of things, and definitely receptive to this idea of also relaying their concerns and their unhappiness to Tom Lefroy. And they seem to genuinely agree to this idea. It seems like a couple of these neonates will be going to speak with him at some point.
And so will Judith, when time allows and opportunity presents.
You find, at least during this 1 week, Tom Lefroy is not present, but given your experience in London, you know historically he's been there at least a few times a month. He's not quite the fixture that Belamate is known to be, but he certainly frequents court and Elysium enough that you should expect to see him in the next month. But whether or not you mean to remain here that long is a question for you.
Certainly not.
Alright. And Cormac is laying low during this week, we'll say. Is there anything else he wants to do while laying low? Any conversations he wants to have?
Not really, no. He's eager to get on north to Edinburgh.
Gotcha. Okay. So the weekends, you're just beginning March 1455, when it seems that Tom has secured you a nice tailored outfit. I was going to say it would just be a very nice doublet vest and pants, but I'll let the two of you decide if you order something else more extravagant or more specific.
Well, Cormac did say something about black leather.
He's all for a black leather tunic with hose and leather boots. With a fine fur cape. So then again, he can once again look like a lord after the current fashion.
Given the expertise at Sevilla Row, and with the coin that Tom can provide, you have precisely what you need to get such an extravagant gift and outfit prepared. And by the end of it, you do look much more lordly and higher stature than you previously did. And for that, for as long as this outfit is not assaulted or otherwise very badly damaged, you can take a note to add an extra die to anything revolving around appearance. And remind me if I forget.
Neat. I'm hot.
You are.
Every woman crazy about a sharp-dressed man.
Player better recognize.
I was going for ZZ Top, but moving on. And at some point during that week, Tom would reach out to make arrangements for sea passage to Edinburgh rather than going back.
Okay. And Gautier de Cour, is he coming along with this too? I'm assuming he is.
Oh, yes. Unless he objects because he wants to get back to studying, but...
It seems that... Go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, this is much more fun, that's all.
Yeah, and he is inclined to agree. Now that he has his degree, that he's a true master, he feels free to pursue the adventures that you would have him go on, and of course, you know, the blood draws him more to you than to anything else at this point. And so he's already been quite thrilled and sometimes alarmed at what you get up to, capturing ships and daring escapes from things. So he seems eager and excited to follow you to whatever Scotland brings.
Excellent. How are his clothes looking these days?
They're looking a bit shabby. He doesn't look like a pauper or a peasant, but he certainly looks like a student on somewhat harder times. You think it's been a little while since he's had a change of clothes?
Cormac's going to give him some money to buy some. He's not going to go for the elegantly tailored, more the off-the-rack, quote-unquote. But he can do that during the day.
Mm-hmm.
Something that won't make him look so threadbare. They have to keep up appearances for the Prince of Edinburgh, after all.
Gautier seems very grateful at your gift, and although there's not exactly storefronts for clothes in these times, he is able to find someone who's willing to provide him a new cloak and robe. Wine red, looking like much more like a refined scholar that he feels he's due for. And he does look quite a bit more respectable after that. So you feel like he could pass in the appropriate crowds, especially in comparison to you. It's a much more comparable distinction now that you look as well as you do. He can arguably say he belongs to the same crowd.
Excellent. And Cormac is ready.
All right. So just at the beginning of April 1455, the two of you are able to set a course, leaving the ports of London and going north into the North Sea and wrapping around the coast of the British Isles up north, where you will be docking after about a week in total at sea. You will be arriving at Leith.
Is there any way to feed aboard the boat without drawing too much attention to us?
That will be difficult. This is aboard a cog, so it's not a very large boat. You can try, although you know it could be a bit dangerous.
He'll wait. He started out full, so he's going to be hungry, but not starving.
Okay. And Thomas, same waiting?
Well, Tom would make sure that he was full before they left, but yeah.
That's fine. You can do that. With your herd in London, you're easily able to do that. So we will transition as you come ashore in Scotland. So by around the beginning of April, middle April 1455, you make port in Leith, which is just a couple miles shy of Edinburgh, north of Hadrian's Wall, and outside the protection of English rule, into the Scottish lowlands. The area here is quite fertile and hospitable to farming, the land defined by the valleys formed by the rivers Forth and Clyde. Even in your short trip from Leith to Edinburgh, you see there are a few small farming communities, although perhaps more sparse than England. You reach the wooden walls and the gate of Edinburgh, just south of the Firth of Forth. The city of Edinburgh is built on a slope of a massive hunk of granite, left behind from some ice age in the past, with a commanding view across the entire valley. The city is most populated in Scotland at around 500 dwellings, and you see this as you pass in through the gates, but the wealth here pales in comparison to cities like Bristol or London. The Edinburgh Castle is a very impressive structure that sits watching over the entire town at the highest peak of the city, and ruled over by James II, King of Scots, at the young age of 25. There's a long street that runs down the length of the city from the royal residence at the top. And so you are near the base of this as you enter Edinburgh. With the Anglo-Scottish wars still smoldering, this place sees very few Englishmen of any good intention these days and nights. So the group of you are walking into the city gates.
Tom will cut his eyes towards Cormac. I think this time maybe you'd better do all the talking.
I'm not too fond of the English here. Of course, neither is Ireland. But at least we didn't go to war with you. Well, not for quite some time. Cormac squares his shoulders and prepares to be accosted.
You see, the city is not extremely busy at night. It's still quite cold, colder this far north than it has been in the past in the south. And just as you're entering the city and walking up the streets, very quickly you see on the left-hand side a string of gallows leading up, close to a dozen men and women hanging from their necks, swaying gently back and forth. Look like they've been up there for a while, maybe a week or so, with wooden signs brutally nailed into the flesh of their chests, with what looks like a very simple expression scrawled into the wood, repeated on each one. Although it is Scott Gaelic, so only Cormac recognizes it, and as you read it, you see it reads, Campbell Hospitality.
Do I know anything about the Campbells?
Make an intelligence politics roll, standard difficulty. Actually, I'm put it at 7. Since you're a native to Ireland, this is a little bit outside of your purview. Three successes. Alright, let me review my notes.
Cormac will translate the sign for the benefit of the others, however.
All right. You know the Campbells were a significant clan and family in Scotland for a long time. Let's see here. 3 successes. You also know that they were blamed for some of the weakness that Scotland has suffered and some of the ensuing losses they've had to the English, and they were usurped as the major family of influence in Scotland at the Battle of Redford 150 years ago, replaced by the MacDougalls.
Do I have reason to believe these are members of the Campbell household or victims of them? Those signs could go both ways. If he doesn't know, he's going to ask somebody on the street.
There's something you might know about what this is in reference to. Yeah, with 3 successes, I'll give that to you. More recently, you know that somehow the Campbells were responsible in facilitating a very dark and grim act. There were 2 noble boys, children really, who were invited to Edinburgh for dinner, and they were executed. It was a trap. The Campbells are blamed for this. And this was within maybe the last 20 years. So you can tell in the last century and a half, the Campbells have become very notorious and disliked amongst many Scottish.
So I would guess that these are Campbells then.
Probably.
Isn't that charming? This is how the Scottish treat their feuds.
Well, it does settle it then, doesn't it?
For them it does. What else does it settle in your mind?
The need for me to keep my mouth shut, lest an English tongue sour Scottish ear.
Cormac shakes his head. These are Scottish men and women hanging here. So long as you keep your etiquette about you, I think you'll be fine. We have to come up with a good reason why we're here, though. Should we be asked?
Should we be asked by anyone other than Malcolm, you mean?
No pretenses with Malcolm.
No. We've come to treat with Malcolm. The Covenant knows that we are seeking allies in Ireland and Scotland. It was, in fact, their directive. We do.
And how do you suppose we find him? Without doing a bit of research, that is.
Tom will point up at Edinburgh Castle.
I very much doubt he resides there. That's the King's castle.
If you were a prince in Scotland,
I will also have you both make an intelligence politics difficulty 8, and this is more revolving around Cainite politics.
That settles it. The hackers did mess with the dice.
Alright, 0 from Tom, 2 successes for Cormac. So Cormac, as you're looking up towards the Castle of Edinburgh, you recall your sire, Sir Hugh, speaking at some of the history of the Covenant and of the former Gauntlet, and of the history of the relations between Scotland and England, the Cainites specifically. You recall the Gauntlet came to Edinburgh before. The Gauntlet came on some task of the Covenant that you believe was related to demanding tribute, and they came back empty-handed.
Besides, he says, remembering this, we might have problems with MacDougal as well, now that I think about it.
could be so.
His relations with the previous Gauntlet were not well.
But remember, we're not here representing the Covenant.
I suppose we'll see whether or not he believes that. So what do we do? Stride up to the gates and ask to see MacDougal?
It's not the worst idea you've had all day.
It was a jest. That's a terrible idea. The city isn't very large. If we find our way to one of the larger watering holes, maybe one of the other Cainites will find us.
I suppose that's one way to be about it.
Besides, I'm a bit peckish.
As am I.
But do remember, our free feeding does not apply here.
That's true. All the more reason to introduce ourselves sooner rather than later.
Come on, this way.
And Tom will follow.
He's gonna start leading down one of the larger roads. We're sure to find something that way. Maybe even the main street coming in from the gates.
Coming up the main street that leads all the way up to the castle itself, you quickly do find a tavern. You see that any writing that is present is mostly present in Scott Gaelic. Occasionally you'll see French, nothing in English.
Tom will make a point of using French while he's here.
Cormac will use French as well, only because, although Irish and Scottish Gaelic have the same root and much of the same structure, they're more dialects of each other, they might not understand him too well.
You do find one of these taverns, and it seems to have a little green apple as perhaps its name. Based on the noise, you certainly recognize it as what it is. And you enter, and even at this late hour, there are plenty of people here sharing drinks. In that way, this does seem very familiar to England.
This is my kind of place. Look at these rugged bastards. They look like they're made out of old shoe leather.
Just my kind.
They certainly do like beards here, don't they?
Tom will grin a bit and stroke his own.
A large man, bearded of course, kind of stumbles past you, bumping into the side of you. He doesn't really say anything as he does. Tom kind of bumps you as you are standing near the doorway. You just think he's more drunk than aggressive, and he kind of makes his way out. And in his wake, you see the barkeep looks at the two of you a bit side-eyed.
Tom will gesture for Cormac to lead the way.
Cormac will make his way over to the bar then.
The man kind of looks at you, continuing to be a bit skeptical, certainly, and he speaks to you in Scott Gaelic, which you're able to essentially understand. Fuck do you want?
What's the best of your local swill? Cormac will respond in Irish Gaelic.
He has an obvious reaction, his head kind of turning a bit at that. He smirks a bit. Irish fuck.
Sláinte. And he winks at him.
So
You want
whatever
to do
the fuck
something
is
about
behind me. He kind of points this barrel that's kind of leaking a bit.
Looks like piss. I'll have 2. No, 3. He'll thumb over to Gautier.
Gautier just kind of looks dumbstruck, looking about. He obviously stands out. That boy with you. About to fall over.
He's a bit of a prissy pants. But he's like a son to me.
He smirks as he turns about and goes to get some mugs ready. And by now a few other patrons in this tavern have begun to take notice of the group of you.
He'll turn to Thomas, kind of snapping at him. Oi, money.
Tom will kick up a few coins.
And he'll grin at him.
Enjoying yourself.
More than you can know.
Tom is good-naturedly grinning, of course.
Gautier, kind of still looking out to the crowd, speaks to you sidelong, Cormac. My lord, these men, they smell of hogs.
They probably lie with them too.
He's kind of looking about. The barkeep returns with a few drinks in hand. He kind of lets them fall onto the counter, and there's a little bit of a splash of some of this piss-smelling ale. And he takes the coins on the table, dragging them across the wood and into his pocket. He nods to you and then turns back to whatever he was cleaning.
Cormac will grab the 3 mugs, turning around, handing one to Thomas and one to Gautier. Drink up, boy, you look like you've seen a ghost.
Gautier seems surprised. He starts to drink. You see he's almost about to puke it up.
Forgot how long you've been sheltered in that goddamn library.
He kind of pulls at the collar of his cloak and robe.
We're going to teach you to live a little yet. And he'll give it a companionable slap on the shoulder. Once again, too hard.
More of his ale goes spilling as he kind of steadies himself. He gets a few laughs and points from some of the men at the nearby table.
Let's find ourselves a place to hunker down. Even if we have to take it from someone.
Tom is scanning the area for anyone who smells of more of soot than dirt. Possibly someone who's been working a bellows or otherwise engaged in manufacturing of some sort.
It's difficult because this whole place, as Gautier said, smells of dirt and hogs and animals, the unwashed masses, which you're not unused to, but it's certainly very pungent in here. So I'll give you a perception investigation, difficulty 7, to find somebody you think maybe has spent more time working at their craft than not bathing. You find one man with the telltale signs of soot on his face, and you smell it as well. He seems to be a few drinks in already. He looks old, his hair more gray and white than black, hunched back slightly, his head kind of bobbing up and down, half asleep. Meanwhile, Cormac, you find a table that looks a bit dirty. It looks like no one's bothered to clean up whatever mess was here before. There's some spilled ale and empty glass. There's even some broken pieces of ceramic on the bench you have to kind of swipe away.
This one's perfect. Right there, Gautier. Watch your arse.
He very closely looks at where he's sitting down. He's very gentle about it.
Cormac just chuckles to himself. But now he has a good vantage point from which to look at the rest of the patrons here and see if they're being observed.
What does Thomas do with his old drunk friend?
Well, the language barrier is going to be a little bit of a trick, but he'll try. You said he looks old? About how old?
Somewhere in his 50s.
Okay. So he'll approach it that way. Here, grandfather. Let me get you a bowl of stew. And he'll wrap a coin on the side of his
Wrap a coin on the side of the what?
table.
He kind of groggily looks up to you, unsteady. His eyes look tired. He says something to you and you think Scottish. Just mutters it. If you want, you can try and cajole him, even though there's a language barrier, to the point where you can feed. It's just going to be pretty difficult.
We will try.
Okay. The charisma expression difficulty, we'll go with 8. You have to not only convince him to trust you and talk with you, as you look very English and speak very French, but also to be in a position where you can feed. One success. It's really rough. You can tell he gets kind of belligerent at times, but when he sees that you're trying to do something for him, he seems to lighten up a bit, and eventually you do find an opportunity where he's stepping away and he doesn't seem to mind you coming with him, and that's when you have your opportunity to feed. My next question is, how hungry are you?
It should be fine.
Yeah, I'll say you're fine. So you're... Obviously the beast is eager to feed, but you're in control enough that it's not overpowering. So how much will you take?
He'll take 3 and then order the man some stew for when he wakes up.
Okay. As this man was quite drunk, you also start to feel the effects of this. Whatever he was drinking, as dilute as it was, he must have been drinking a lot, because you feel it too.
Well, that was the whole point of coming here.
Yep. So you kind of lean him against one of these old wooden tables in the corner. He obviously already looked drunk and now he just looks passed out. After a while, you see someone bring some small bowl over to him. Meanwhile, Cormac, you're watching the tavern scene for a while, and you do see that out of one of the back rooms, of course it's not a very large tavern, but there is another door going in, and this opens, and a man steps out, which you may have seen in the past. He looks like perhaps a noble of some kind. He seems to have furs and some basic leather armor and banding. He has a short sword strapped to his back. Long facial hair. He seems fairly chummy with the people in here. Some of them kind of look over to him and give him welcoming expressions. He obviously is known to these men on some level. You think you might have seen him in York. Specifically in Elysium.
That's... Okay, go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, although he was not there very long.
It's good enough for Cormac. He'll tell Gautier, stay here. I'll be back in a moment.
This man seems to stumble a bit as he walks in. He kind of hovers over one of the tables, his hand resting on the shoulder of one of these Scots, and they seem to be chummy. But his eyes go up and meet yours, and he seems to straighten out a bit. He pats the man on the shoulder a couple of times as he departs. You can see he's just trying to walk far enough away so that you can catch up to him.
And catch up to him, Cormac will. Being careful not to trip over anybody's feet on the way.
You stop not too far from the entrance again, but when he turns to you. Well, look who it is. Gauntlet Lord this far north? I wonder for what purpose.
We wish to entreat with the Lord of these lands. The Night Lord of these lands.
Malcolm. He nods a couple times, rubbing at his long beard.
We weren't sure where to find him, so we came here.
You won't find Malcolm in a place like this.
No, but we did find you.
You found Prince Anselmus of Nottingham.
I remember you now. We did have a brief conversation, you and I.
He nods.
You were lamenting how your princedom wasn't quite a princedom anymore.
Still a princedom. He kind of looks off to the side.
What brings you this far north, my lord?
I had some family and friends I wish to check up on here.
Well, it is good to see a familiar face.
I see you're not alone here. Important, government business? The two of you up here?
He nods, not daring to lie out loud.
Well, maybe I'll join you, show you around. Could at least direct you over to Malcolm's court.
I think we'd like that very much, and thank you.
He nods, smiling.
How are things going in Nottingham these nights?
Nottingham gets on as Nottingham has. More removed from all the, politics.
In some ways, I think you're better off for it.
He nods a couple times, as though perhaps uncertain. But let us not waste any time. Let's get your compatriot. I'll bring you up to the court.
I'll gather young Gautier and see if I can find my other.
He nods. Kind of leans against the wall.
He'll saunter back over to the table. Hope you got enough to drink. We're leaving.
Tom's not terribly far away. Plenty enough for now.
Gautier is kind of finishing one of these mugs of ale and stumbling over in your direction, Cormac. My lord, it tastes like piss, but the longer you drink it, the better it tastes.
That's how all the best tales are. Although I'm sure there are those here who would disagree with me.
And you know, the smell is not so bad when you get used to it. He's kind of starting to slur his words and leaning on you a bit.
Bit like a whore's underarms, I should think.
Kind of nods, looking about. Shall I go and find a room? Perhaps they have rooms upstairs.
As I said, we're leaving.
Oh.
We'll find accommodations elsewhere.
He nods and starts going for the door ahead of you.
He was talking to Gautier when he said finish your drinking, but he's glad that Thomas is nearby. See that fellow over there, he says to Thomas, nodding in Thomas's direction.
I do. He's hard to miss.
Prince of Nottingham.
Viceroy, but don't say that to him.
Right. He's going to take us to the court.
Hopefully.
I had a chat with him a while back. He seems a personable enough fellow.
So did Ragnar when I first met her.
Probably just reaffirming her boot at his throat. Or you're saying that Ragnar seemed personable?
Yep, that.
Oh, I thought you meant Ragnar was talking to him. Never mind. Cross that. He shrugs slightly, but nods in that direction.
And Selmas presses himself off the wall, smiling wide through the dark hair of his beard. Ah, my lord, an honor, of course, to see you here as well. Prince Anselmus, if you don't remember.
We had occasion to meet once. Thomas Chamberlain, in case you don't remember either.
Hard to forget somebody so important back south, huh? Come, let us go.
Lead on, your grace. Lead on.
And he pushes open the doors and leads the group of you out into the streets and perhaps in the direction of Prince Malcolm. And at that, the scene will fade, and we will take our 15-minute break since we're at the 2-hour.
Sweet.
Sarah here, sounds like?
Yes, I am.
Good.
I was wondering why my push-to-talk sound wasn't activating, and I found out that while I was gone, the numlock ended up shifting.
I was waiting for you to say there were cookies beneath the keys.
No. No.
Happened to me once. Anyway.
Happened to me a lot of times when I was a teenager. I learned from it.
I didn't. Anyway. I'm going to get back to Elined and Robert. All right. So, Elined and Robert, you're in York, and it's going to be about a week before Ragna is actually able to see you. You're eventually able to get a hold of at least Jesper, her child, who also seems quite busy meeting with commanders of various kinds and ranks. And it's through him that you learn that Ragna's quite preoccupied, but will be available in a number of nights for you to speak with. It seems that he was able to get the message from Mr. Sharp that Elined is putting her support behind Ragna. And it is because of that that she's returning sooner rather than she would. So you have close to a week of time spent in York, with which you may spend as you please. This will put you in almost late April, closer to mid-April for the both of you. We'll start with Robert. You were beginning your task in trying to determine who goes up and down to this highly protected floor in York Castle. Do you mean to continue doing that?
He pretty much figured out a butler is going up there, correct?
During the
And
night, it seems like there's only one.
One butler that goes up there, and he suspects this is room of a important duke or some such.
You think that, yes. Possibly even the Earls, the Nevilles.
Interesting.
And it sounds like you have an anticipation of Riddle Penborough returning and some meeting with him and Dorothy.
He's looking forward to that meeting. The most. He doesn't have a reason to keep watching the servant at the moment, or this particular part of the castle. Ragna's chambers, what does he remember from the inside? Like, does it go off into other rooms in that chamber itself?
Ragna's chamber, from your brief stint in it, you recall was quite large. There was, it looks like, room for a wash basin and a screen for changing. There was actually a significant window, although heavily clothed, and obviously there would be some wooden panels that have to be opened and closed. It didn't appear that it went off into other rooms. It just seemed to be kind of a master of guest bedrooms, perhaps.
Okay. And does she actually spend much time in that location?
In the nights that you're there, you don't see her go in that direction. You think she might be abroad somewhere.
Aha. Is the chamber guarded right now?
It is not. I will put a caveat there in that the door itself is not guarded. The castle is heavily guarded, and it would not be long before some guard patrol maybe saw like the entrance to that door, which is closed and obviously locked.
Okay. How much time remains before this meeting?
So there was the first night you were there. It sounds like that this meeting will be in a couple nights, and Ragna is not expected to be back until the end of the week.
Is there a way to get to the outside of the castle and, like, see you, or guess where this window would be?
I will say yes. If you spend enough time figuring out what level it's on and where it's at, obviously there is a window, so it must access somewhere, you're able to finally determine that if you walk the perimeter of one of the walls, one of the battlements, you do catch a glimpse of the window, which is shuttered and closed right now. It doesn't look out into the city so much as it looks out kind of perpendicular along the walls and the battlements. So there are no opportunities for peeping Tom, so to speak.
None at all, huh?
No, there is a guard tower further along the wall, but it's quite a ways away. Give me a perception investigation, standard difficulty.
Okay.
Wow, really?
Yep.
That is a true botch. Okay. So you're looking up this window, and you think that if you were on the... let me think about this. I want to play this. You think you could climb up to the window through some of the stone bricks along the tower, and you could gain a view if you were able to climb up it, because it looks like these wooden panels open outward.
Okay. Keeping a mental note of that he can just climb up and open them from the outside.
Yes.
Okay. Alright, so he's satisfied with that window for now. Can we go to Elined? I need to think about what to do next.
Sure. Elined, you have almost a week before you're expecting Ragna to be available. She's either abroad or somewhere in the city unavailable at this time. How else will you be spending this time?
She will likely go to the training grounds where she sparred before in order to see the measure of people.
You see it's in much more use than it was previously. It seems to be actively recycled with men training or resting. Go ahead.
Then she will observe, look for the noticeable flaws in their styles, and if they will allow her, try to offer some tips.
Sure, give me a perception academics, since this specifically relates to your knowledge of tactics and warfare.
Does detail-oriented apply? I already know tactics does.
I will say, if tactics applies, we'll say the other one. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I'm not going to have you have double bonus.
Yeah, I know. It'd be dumb if that was the case.
Yeah, so you've already got a specialty applicable here. So that's 4 successes with your specialty. You quickly assess that based on the expensive equipment and the skill that the men here are displaying, these aren't just foot soldiers, these are knights. And there is not much room for improvement that you think you could offer them. They fight with great stamina and strength, but a skill you don't see in a common foot soldier. These are men of noble birth who have been trained most of their lives in the art of war. So there's not much to improve on here. You see that they're well prepared, whoever these knights belong to.
Alright.
Is there anything else Elined wants to do? Want me to come back to you?
Did we only see Jesper that one time?
I'll say over this period of time, you see him a couple times. He's always in a rush somewhere. I'm gonna go back to Robert.
Okay.
Robert, what else have you thought of?
Well, I guess more questions. Was that the only way up into the upper levels, or was there like another stairwell, something of that nature?
It's the only one stairwell that goes up to the highest level of York Castle that you can tell, unless you scaled the walls, which, based on this outward appearance going up to Ragna's room, looks feasible.
And how many guards were watching?
On the wall, there's a healthy number of guards patrolling the walls. It's pretty well surveyed.
In the hallway?
The hallways also the hallways likewise have increased security since your last visit here. Fortunately, you look like you belong, so you're not often questioned or bothered.
Fair enough. If he gets a chance. Well, no, he's not going to chat the butler. No, no. He is going to. Why not? He'll go to Elysium and see if anyone's there, just to socialize.
Okay. You visit the crypt, where you know that Elysium has been declared kind of meeting location as needed. It's very quiet. It doesn't appear that Elysium here is quite the social opportunity as it is in other Covenant cities. Certainly not as popular as it is in London. If there are places to socialize in York, it must either be at the court in the Castle York, or perhaps more privately in the homes of its inhabitants.
There's no one here at all, huh?
No. At least not when you visit.
From his time in York, is there like a certain period where Elysium was more active than what it obviously is now?
From your memory, it was never extremely active. It seemed to be the place that Canaanites would go to kind of in a holding pattern until they were able to get a presentation or authority from Mr. Sharp to come and go as they please, or to meet with the prince. It wasn't ever very popular as a meeting location to sit and socialize, and you can tell why. Down in this crypt, it's not very comfortable. It's a bit cramped. The hallways are not very conducive to socializing. There are no musicians or ballrooms.
So noted. Okay, so he'll seek out Dorothy.
Alright. Returning to Castle York, you find her in due time, and we'll say this is on the night of your meeting, towards the earlier end of it. And she seems to have donned a nice black and dark brown evening gown. Conservative for her. And she's stepping out into the hallway, and her eyes light up as she sees you. Ah, Robert. Are you here to find me?
Yes. I have a question. If I now look around, is this area pretty empty?
You're just seeing a couple of guards leave the hallway, which leaves the two of you alone briefly.
While making sure he's out of earshot of anyone that could be here. And he'll lean and whisper, "Where would I get a key for a certain room?"
She smiles devilishly. You need no key to get to my room, my dear.
Well, it is good to know that invitation is always open. Of course, you know which room I speak of.
Her smile fades. Of course. My sire. That would not be very easy, my dear. Of course, Mr. Sharp would have this key ring for it.
Indeed. Does he always keep it on his person?
Religiously.
And I suspect he is the sole overseer of the keys.
The Duke of York has another attendant of his own. A copy was made. I know not which man this is.
Tell me, have the nobility been out and about the castle?
I've seen them here and there. Best to stay out of their way.
Aye, that would be the safest.
What are you up to?
Looking for any sort of opportunity.
I take it you've not had any success with my sire while abroad, then?
Oh, not at all. Barely had a chance to get close to her.
That is regrettable. I believe we're running out of time here. Come, we should hurry along to our meeting with our mutual friend. She says, looking about herself again.
Agreed.
And she takes your arm and begins escorting you away.
And Robert goes.
All right. So you will be heading to your meeting. Meanwhile, we're going to bend time a bit so Elined can meet with the prince. I'm sure she'll be a couple days, nights ahead. What's that?
Oh, while she sees Jesper going about and being busy, if he has a free moment, she will try to stealthily tell him that she has some information that could be useful from a person by the name of Cinewolf. That was my pause before. I was trying to dig through the notes for that freaking name.
Okay. He seems to stop at the recognition of the name, and He ushers the two of you away into a side chamber away from all the patrols and looks to you very seriously. Of what do you speak? Of this name?
Yes, well, he mentioned after waking up from several years of slumber that he no longer can convince his brother of anything. The brother instead seems to be being manipulated by that Tremere Magister.
Truly a dangerous thing if what you say is true. Of this Magister. I know of whom you speak.
Furthermore, it seems that he is being kept out of the loop, or last I spoke to him, it seems like he was being kept out of the loop by his brother.
Do you think he could be an ally?
I am uncertain. What I know is he was attempting to plead to us, Gauntlet members, to try to remove the Magister, to try to remove the influence, but I fear it is much beyond the point of being able to do that now.
Is politics and jihad? He kind of looks off to the side, annoyed. They're so tiresome.
Indeed they are, but it is the life of the society we're in.
These words are better said to my sire.
I know this.
He looks to you, his face softens a bit. But it is good that you are here. You shall be most pleased. I am glad as well. He smiles again, tapping you on the shoulder.
She smiles in return, says, and I am glad to be here as well.
I know she had some concern. She spoke of a meeting you had in London.
Yes, I unfortunately was not very, talkative with that one event in particular. I only spoke a few times, but yes. The exact phrasing that was chosen by some of my compatriots could have been a bit better.
From what Sharp tells me, your compatriots are not all here. Are they not
That
also
isn't-
here to back them? To back Ragnar?
That is indeed so. They had business elsewhere.
He seems to nod at that. Well, I think I should see my sire in a couple nights from now. I will make sure that she hears these words, but I think better coming from you than me. You know more
Of
about these
course.
intricacies.
I was there for the discussion, yes, but I am significantly more plain-spoken when explaining things. Some princes like, some don't.
But at least I will know what you are talking about. He smiles again.
She lets out a small laugh and says, yes, indeed so. And it doesn't waste nearly as much time. Though I fear the matters that are currently transpiring are, well, there could very well be outside forces that are attempting to take some sort of advantage.
This sounds very complicated and dangerous.
It is.
I am afraid, my friend, I must get back to my duties. But we shall speak again soon. He nods to you.
Of course, I wouldn't want to keep you more than is absolutely necessary.
He smiles faintly, nods again, and departs from the side chamber.
Alright. Is there a library that's open to the public that doesn't require any special permissions to get that she doesn't already have?
There's a study which someone with your status could get into. It has a modest library in it.
Alright, then, and the rest of her time she'll just be going over books.
Right. And at that, we will transition back to Scotland. Meanwhile, it's still around the beginning to mid-April for Cormac and Thomas. Early into one of your first nights here at Edinburgh, you've come across Anselmus, once Prince of Nottingham, and he is leading you up the long road through Edinburgh to the castle. Or at least close to the castle. You see that near the top you're guided away towards what looks like one of the noble palaces, or perhaps the noble palace of Edinburgh. A couple of the guards near the front of these double wooden doors nod to Anselmus as he makes his way in. The three of you behind him. Inside, you make your way into the great hall of this palace, and you see it is well lit in here. The palace's stone foundations and wooden walls, the decorations are somewhat humble, but banners are present hanging along the walls. You see one of them with the emblem of a right hand grasping a cross. Another banner with a pelican at the nest. They have their various inscriptions. There is one decoration that stands out, however. At the end of this long wooden table that makes up the great hall, near the hearth, behind the head of the table, there is mounted a large wolf's head, massive, at least as large as your torso, gray and white-haired, and bearing multiple claw scars across the left cheek and eye. Anselmus stops near the entrance as one of the attendants inside looks to him. In Scott Gaelic, he tells this attendant to go fetch Lord Malcolm. Then he turns back to the group of you. If we're lucky, you should be down here soon. But, you could be busy.
We're willing to wait, I think.
We appreciate your assistance. There's no reason for you to tarry on our account.
Oh, I insist I be here. Good to improve relations, huh? Maybe even, help with some introductions. He smiles wide.
You know the prince well, I take it.
We've talked a few times. I would not say we are on bad terms.
What kind of man is he? Reasonable?
Well, he kind of lowers his voice a bit. You know, these Scottish nobles, they can get kind of high and mighty. Full of themselves, huh?
Sounds like nobility.
I'm sure the two of you will make a good impression. He nods a couple of times. He finds a wall to kind of lean against and otherwise remains quiet. Meanwhile, Gautier seems still quite inebriated. He's not stumbling quite as badly as he was. He seems to have gotten a grip on himself enough. Perhaps sobered by the severity of this place. My lord, did you see that wolf's head? Giant thing.
That's rather impressive, isn't it?
Didn't know wolves got that big.
Cormac's face twists a little bit. Perhaps in a worry. They get rather large.
That big? Son, that's a child's toy. It's barely off his mother's teat.
Given the things we've seen, right, Thomas?
Tom will wink a bit at Cormac. Quite right.
Gautier's kind of looking at you wide-eyed, his mouth full agape in awe at this.
Imagine a wolf. Oh, how big would you say, Thomas? 20 hands high?
At least. It was bigger than my horse.
You don't say.
Such things exist in this world, and you'd do well to stay away from them.
He looks back at the massive wolf's head with renewed awe. You end up waiting there almost an hour before you finally hear footsteps from further down the hallway. And several people enter at once. You see a young man who looks well prepared to go into the wild, with a long cloak drawn about him and leather armor, and actually 2 blades strapped at his side, one on either side. You also see a young woman. She similarly is dressed, perhaps more for utility than for housemaking, as she seems to also have leather bands strapped about her patchwork armor, perhaps. And the main individual leading the group of them, he seems to be at least 6.5 feet tall. Very tall and muscular man. He has very little hair on top of his head, but a very large brown beard. His small eyes that search the group of you over. He has a simple hatchet at his side. Anselmus pushes himself off the wall, his eyes widening a bit, seeming to pay more attention now. My lord, I bring envoys from the Covenant, Gauntlet Lords. And he kind of does a sweeping gesture to the 2 of you as this burly man, masculine as he is, takes a stand by the head of the table, just in front of this large wolf's head, as his 2 companions stand off to his side. He looks the group of you over. Envoys of the Covenant. He kind of calls out to you, speaking in Scott Gaelic.
In a manner of speaking, my lord, Cormac will say. Do you speak the lingua franca? Or perhaps English?
He looks annoyed at that. I'll have you both make an appearance etiquette roll. Cormac, difficulty 6, Thomas, difficulty 8.
It's not a botch.
2 successes from Cormac, no successes from Tom.
Tom will apply a bit of charisma then. In French. I won't sour your ears with my shabby English language, but I'm unfortunately ignorant of the local parlance. A personal failing. If you'll forgive it, please. And he'll bow.
That's a lot of flowery fucking language. He responds in French. He looks back to you, Cormac. What have you got?
Got, my lord.
For me. You come here, an envoy of some kind. The fuck does the Covenant want now?
To speak frankly with you, my lord, they don't.
His eyebrow raises slightly. Speak your mind.
Cormac nods, looking to Thomas.
If it please you, may I be the only Englishman present to hear what he has to say.
Anselmus looks at you curiously. And Malcolm, this man in the middle, who seems to be... Malcolm in the middle seems to be speaking to you. What makes you think you can make that request to me?
Because our request is for you and you alone.
After a few tense moments, he looks over to Anselmus and gestures him away with a wave of his hand. And Anselmus departs, not out of the palace, but further into it, off down a hallway. What did you say your name was? Gauntlet Lord.
Who's he speaking to?
You, Thomas.
Tom will give Cormac a measured glance, almost questioning.
Might as well tell him.
Thomas Chamberlain. Not that I expect the name means more than a sack of shit around here.
And you, Irishman?
Cormac de Courcy. My surname, at least, you've probably heard.
He makes no acknowledgement of that.
But regardless, as we said, we don't come to you as Gauntlet Lords.
Those rings say otherwise.
Tom will take his off and pocket it.
To the pit with this bloody ring. And he'll pull it off and do the same.
He watches with curiosity.
We come to you with our hats in our hands because we think we might find in you a kindred spirit. One who thinks the English experiment has long outlived its welcome.
And why should I give a shite about the English covenant or what happens to it?
Cormac is at a loss for words on that one.
Tom will reach into a different pocket and pull out a necklace with an inverted ankh and toss it towards Malcolm, because she sent us.
He collects it off the long wooden table. Maybe she did. But just because you take your ring off, Englishman, doesn't mean I have to believe what you say.
True. But there is a shipment of iron and wax and wool with your name on it, should you choose to treat with her.
A shipment taken from Prince Barbaros.
He looks between the two of you.
It is a kingly ransom, I assure you. And should we be discovered as the ones who did this, I'm sure you know what the Covenant will do to us.
I was told there'd be an envoy.
And here we are.
I did not expect the Gauntlet Lord to arrive at my palace. They'll string you lads up for this.
Only if we fail.
And what do they want from me for the shipment?
They wish to negotiate for the use and assistance of your border reavers.
He looks off to the side to the man with the two swords at his side, briefly, before looking back to you. They're busy these nights. There's a conflict about the border.
We've heard.
And where would they be going?
As has been expressed to me, there is a tactical usefulness in ignorance. That is not within our purview to discuss. And we weren't told.
I'll have you make a manipulation. I'll allow subterfuge or expression here. The difficulty is going to be 8. Alright, was that subterfuge?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go with 2 successes.
Persuasive or selective omission?
I'm gonna say no for here. He waits a few moments after that. Careful, Englishman. Your cockiness is likely to get your cock cocked off.
Cormac laughs despite himself and covers his mouth. I'm sorry, my lord.
Tom chuckles, though, as well, in spite of himself. You understand there is need for some degree of secrecy. The less you know, the safer you are.
He doesn't seem to acknowledge that either, remaining still. Well, laddie, it might be that I'm already entertaining other offers. You've only just arrived. I'm sure with your fancy upbringing, kind of looks you up and down, you're used to negotiations. Make me feel comfortable.
With all due respect, my lord, cut the shite. What do you want?
He looks to you with new anger in his eyes. I will not spill Scottish blood for an English problem unless I believe it helps Scotland. As I said, there are other offers on the table.
Was he asking for your assistance to oust Ragnar? Or bolster her forces?
I'm hungry, he says after a few moments, kind of stretching. I'm bored of your words.
How does shattering the Covenant sound to you? How does that serve Scotland and her son?
You've got a silver tongue, lad, but you're gonna have to do better than that.
I'm done silvering your tongue or silvering your ears. We come with legitimate profit for you, offered in good faith.
And I have not rejected your offer.
I like you. You're not looking for honeyed words, sugary sentiments, or a bag of hot air being blown up your arse.
You might be used to getting your way down south, Englishman, but up here,
Hardly.
you're gonna take some time convincing me.
As you like. Would you like me to demonstrate my commitment to my cause, or simply pull the shipment from my arse?
I said, I'm hungry. Worry about these details later. He starts to turn slowly away from you. Could stay here if you like. And it calls back to you without looking back as the other two companions start to fall in behind him. And it looks like he's going towards another hallway, unless you do something different.
Cormac's not going to stop him for now, at least. He's stubborn as a mule.
Meanwhile, Gautier's stood as far back and making himself as small as he could. Does that mean we can stay here, my lord?
It means it. Probably for as long as it takes.
In my experience, if a Scotsman says you can stay until you sit in his eye or kill this orc.
You do not seem very welcoming, my lord. Is it safe?
Scottish hospitality is very different from English hospitality. It might be a bit more curt, but it's a damn sight more sincere.
We just have to figure out what else he wants. He did not verify that neither Ragnar or Barbaros was asking for his aid.
Anselmus is here for a reason. Anyone calling themselves prince when their title is viceroy isn't exactly happy with the state of things.
I already know he's not. I sussed that much out of him last time we spoke. He would see value in what we're offering. If we could make it worth his while.
It's a considerable if.
Well, I mean, he is a prince, or viceroy after all. And we would be stripping him of that title. But for something better. And an end to the tyranny of the Covenant.
Did he take the necklace with him when he left?
He looked at it and then set it back down on the table.
Tom's gonna go collect that.
Right, what did Cormac and Thomas do?
Well, he didn't dismiss us from the city, so at the very least we can hunt.
I could certainly use that. Let's see if we can get Gautier settled in first. Maybe get you on the arm of one of the nice Scottish women.
I think the nicest Scottish woman just left.
Well then, the second best one.
Tom will nudge Gautier in the ribs. Hear that? You're about to be the new wife of some pretty Scottish lass.
He looks to you, smiling at first and then seeming a bit confused. I don't understand, my lord.
You will.
Perhaps I'll look for one of these rooms then. Kind of looks around.
We'll help you with that. Won't do to have you wandering around the castle by yourself.
Quite so. They'll go off in search of a vacant room that they apparently can.
Alright. You begin making your way, and soon enough you're caught by an attendant who seems to be looking for you, and this man seems to know that you're expected to have some kind of room prepared for you. So he leads you away, and a haven is prepared for you, which is safe for the day, lower in the palace. And a room is prepared as well for Gautier. Your room is not the most luxurious. The two of you end up in guest quarters below the palace with no windows. The rooms are mostly wooden with stone floors. The beds are low and hard. There's very little for decoration. Although you
Cormac,
know... Go ahead.
I was going to say, Cormac absolutely loves it.
It's certainly more than most in Edinburgh will have to enjoy. Then the two of you once settled mean to hunt?
Yep.
Okay. How is Thomas gonna be trying to hunt in Edinburgh?
Well, first he's going to try and track down the crafty people.
And how do you mean to lure them away?
Honestly, at this hour, if they're still out and about at this hour, they're either drunk or there's no one else around to really be worried about. So I don't know that he's going to be doing a lot of luring.
Just for the record, Cormac is going to go with Thomas, but they'll split off at some point. He's not so picky tonight.
Okay. How exactly are you getting in a position to feed on these people, Thomas? Once you do find them.
Probably he's going to, for lack of a better term, mug them.
Alright, so more physically oriented then?
Yep.
Okay. Go with a wits survival, difficulty 8. Hunting the streets as adventure is difficult enough when you're a local. That is a botch.
But it's only a 1.
It is a 1, and it is a botch. I'm going to assume by this point Cormac has split off to hunt. Unless you want to correct that.
No, he would have, because I said he would. I'm not going to metagame it.
Okay. Then we'll go with your rule. How are you going about hunting tonight? Before we get into this.
He's going to see if he can play on somebody's goodwill. He'll use a little bit of the performance that Thomas has taught him to act like he's lost. See if he can get attracted into anyone to lead him back to the main road, except they won't get there.
Alright, I will take a manipulation performance. Standard difficulty for you since you speak the language and you don't have any particular feeding restraints. One success. So you find one person who... It takes you some time, but you find one of the less drunk men who's maybe making his way home, and he turns away, trying to point out a direction that you should take down these streets, and that's when you get your fangs in. How much will you take?
He will take... Does this guy look like he's in pretty good health?
You think so?
3.
Okay. I don't think you're hungry enough to need a roll either. So you can take 3, and he ends up falling asleep, laying against some sacks of grain and barrels and crates. He'll look like he just passed out from drinking, which is plausible. Meanwhile, Thomas... Let me think about this. I almost want to go back to York, so I have time to think about this. But in the interest of fairness, we'll keep the screen on Thomas. So you're going out and you're trying to hunt, which is very difficult for you because you need a very particular type of blood, and not speaking the language most of these people do makes things harder. So what ends up happening is you find someone you're quite certain fits the bill, and you actually do get in a position where you are feeding on this person, and you take a few points only to realize it's the wrong kind of person, and you eject yourself from them after having just barely taken a few gulps of blood from them, and you immediately start gagging it up. And as you're caught with this, the person seems to realize what's happening and yells and screams, seeing you cough up the blood, kind of bent over, and he yells into the street as he runs away, yelling something in Scott Gaelic. What does Thomas do?
I'm thinking.
That's fair. Do you want me to come back to you?
No, I'm pondering things. Can I catch up to him?
You recover from spitting up this blood and see that he's got a good 50 feet on you, and he's about to make it into the main street. He's running at a good clip, surprisingly healthy. And maybe the adrenaline is kicking in at this point. You could probably catch up to him, you just don't know how far he's going to get before then.
Language barrier. Fuck.
Yes.
Alternately, is there a cobblestone nearby?
We'll say yes.
Can I just wing it at his head?
You can try. Absolutely. Your roll at throwing this improvised weapon at a moving head 50 feet away is going to be difficulty 9.
Spending a willpower on it.
Okay. That's one
Thank
success.
God for the willpower.
Alright, go ahead and roll your damage. – It's improvised weapon, so you won't be gaining any damage bonus from it. So just strength, potency if you have it. There you go. 3 successes, that's 3 lethal to the back of this guy's head. So you see him running, and he's shouting and shouting. You find a stone nearby after you recover and throw it with the strength that only a vampire could put behind this throw. Or perhaps a very strong man. And the stone very narrowly manages to crack him in the back of the head, making a satisfying thwack sound, which echoes out a bit. And he falls over just short of the road. Make a perception alertness roll, difficulty 8. Okay. No successes. Don't worry about the botch. Nothing else happens. This man goes down and falls just short of the road. He actually landed in a shadow just before reaching up to the main road that leads up and down Edinburgh.
Tom is going to go retrieve the unconscious fellow and tuck him into an alcove between 2 tenement buildings where he can sleep off his drunk.
Alright, just as you're reaching to grab at this man's ankle and drag him away, around the corner of this nearby building, 2 guards come running up and see you moving him away. They draw their swords and start yelling something at Scott Gaelic at you as they approach.
Tom will respond, holding his hands up. Lingua franca, lingua franca.
They just keep yelling at you, and they're drawing close. They're getting very close to you with their swords drawn.
Well, he's already made a mess. He's not about to go killing some guards, too. That seems like a terrible idea.
What will he do? These guards look concerned and even angry. One of them looks down and points to the man and then looks back to the guard and says something again.
And Tom will point off in the direction from whence the stone was thrown.
You point off in some direction and they seem to just jab their sword in the air aggressively at you, not trying to strike you, but just kind of angrily swaying it. And it looks like they're about to advance upon you when someone shows up from the same direction they did. Someone you briefly met. The Scottish woman who accompanied Prince Malcolm. She sees what's happening and calls out to them. There's a brief exchange in Scott Gaelic that you don't quite follow. She seems to remain calm, and without needing to roll, you detect there is some supernatural air forming about her. These men seem to calm down and lower their swords eventually, sheathing them. She gestures out casually to the side and then points off in some other direction. They look to each other and nod and start moving off in the direction she pointed at a good clip. And then she turns back to look at the body and then you.
Figured it best not to shit completely on the floor of another man's house.
She smirks as she moves down, crouching to start to pick this man up, or at least help him up.
Tom's going to do the same.
Don't you worry. In this town, I've seen worse.
Never caught your name. And he'll offer a hand.
She hoists up the unconscious man with one hand, and with the other she grasps yours across this man. Camden MacDougall.
Long Tom. And he'll grip her at the wrist. The way appropriate for people who are more martially bent.
And she helps drag this man away over to a dark corner where he can perhaps remain unconscious. You got him good in the head. It was quite a performance you put on earlier.
Which bit?
Your entrance.
The plan was for Cormac to do all the talking. I figured I'd just make things worse.
Well, can I say that luck is on your side? She says, looking down at the man as he's sat down. Malcolm's had worse receptions than that.
Aye, I've heard. I still have my head.
She smiles faintly again. If you're in need of feeding, you should have asked.
I don't like stretching hospitality too far.
Better than getting these poor bastards after us with pitchforks and fire.
True enough.
At this point, she started to lead you back onto the road, back in the direction of the palace.
He's following. Maybe if I'd shown him a bit of leg.
She looks you up and down, smirking. You might have liked that. You might have laughed. Or he might have killed you.
He'd have tried.
Malcolm's not been in the best of moods in the last couple of decades.
I've heard some silly English fop decided to try and screw him.
Wouldn't he know anything about that? The Black Dinner, the Campbells.
That I'm not familiar with.
You seem honest enough for an Englishman. I suppose I could tell you the story.
Careful, that almost sounded like a compliment. No,
The English have done nothing good for me, but I kind of say I share the same hatred that Malcolm does.
I'm interrupting you. I'm sorry. You were going to share a story.
Before that, perhaps we get you something to eat. So you don't try to eat me while I'm telling my story? Joffrey just smiles.
I'm told some people pay extra for that. And he'll grin again.
She laughs and continues to lead on, and the two of you will make your way back in the direction of the palace. And I think we will end the scene in the session here, since we're just about at the hour, and this is as good a transition as any. So we will pick it up again next week with several storylines waiting for conclusion. Sound good?
Ah.
Cool. Good game. Had some near calamities there.
Mostly just the one.
Better than actual. Cool. Let's do... Oh, I don't know. We'll go one experience all around. Do some entertaining role players. Start with Cormac.
Ooh, Yeah, I have to give it to Tom for the absolute mess up. It's on the edge of my seat. What's going to happen?
What's gonna happen?
What's he gonna do? Mess up more. Yay.
Hard knock life. Venture doesn't speak the language. Thomas, what about you?
I'm gonna give it to Cormac. He was really trying to be the talky bit. He just ran into a wall.
That's why teams work out. About Elined.
I'll give it to Robert for his adamant follow through of trying to get into Ragnar's. Despite with the amount of guards there, if he's caught, it's going to turn out horribly.
Missed an important word there, but I'll assume you meant room.
Yes. I thought I said room. Did my
Cut out.
did my mic cut out
You
there?
cut out at a key point, but anyway.
We could just left it like that and let people assume.
Yeah. Robert, how about you?
There is nothing quite as entertaining as a hunting botch. I'll give it to Thomas.
Hell of an arm on that guy. Cool. I had fun. and I'm very interested in seeing how some of this stuff wraps up, since several of you are in the midst of things that have not yet come to pass.
Hijinks is the word you're looking for.
Yes.
And yes, that is a very amusing cutout what was typed out.
Certainly was.
For references, trying to get into Ragna's room.
Yeah, whatever,
With-
Sarah.
Yeah, since with all those guards around, it's going to turn out very badly for him. If he
I mean, he is also trying to get into Ragna's pants, but
That's neither here nor there.
My goodness.
Okay, good game. Thanks for playing. I'll talk to you guys throughout the week, and we'll pick it up again next week.
Ta.
Cool. All right.
Later.